Thank you for staying with us. You're now on the Climate Chat segment of the weekend show. And my name is Zainab Adetola. In Nigeria, one of the regions most affected by climate change is the Niger Delta. This is where Nigeria gets most of its oil revenue from, but it is also a region where communities have to live with the devastating impacts like oil spills, eco degradation, and also air pollution, amongst the host of other things. There is a young woman who has lived these experiences and is now using her voice to advocate for a more sustainable society and ensure that people in that community have access to a better life. Just before I introduce my guest and topic on the show today, I would like you to take a look at this.
I listened as my heartbroken mother mourned over the tragic news of lives lost in the flood. Her voice was heavy with sorrow and the haunting possibility of even more casualties. What further saddened me was the heartbreaking news of a senior in my school who was rumored to have departed with his uncle to Port Harcourt. Amidst the hopeful belief that he had safely arrived at his uncle's house, a cruel reality began to circulate, shrouding the air with sorrow. The whispers of a tragic accident revealed that the hands of death had snatched them away. The treacherous water of the east-west road, like a merciless predator, ensnared their vehicle in a deadly trap, snatching away their lives. As we languished in our small corners, we bore witness to expectant mothers enduring the agony of childbirth, without adequate support for their helpless newborns. The relentless sun during the day and the biting cold during the night showed no mercy to anyone. I stayed awake at night, plagued by the fear that the relentless waters would engulf the helpless IDP camp before the break of day.
Alright, what you just watched is a short performance portraying the impacts of climate change. And that's why on today's episode of Climate Chat, we'll be discussing climate activism. How do you use storytelling? How do you use poetry? How do you use performances to advocate for a more sustainable society? My guest on the show today is Perfect Johndick, a communications expert with We the People campaign and also a climate storyteller. She is the writer and performer of that short piece you just watched. Good morning, Perfect Johndick. Could you kindly unmute? We cannot hear you yet. Please do unmute.
Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry. Good morning.
That's absolutely fine. Yes, we can hear you now. That was such a great piece there. And, you know, when I watched it, I felt so moved to see the realities of how people live every day in the Niger Delta and the challenges that they have to deal with. So tell me, climate storytelling, activism, what is it all about? Why is it even important and why do you do it?
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Perfect Johndick from Rivers State, Nigeria. I ventured into climate story inspired by my boss, Kenesha, when I started volunteering with We the People, where I work for now. He told me that at We the People, we tell stories. And when I started glancing through the reports and all of that, I discovered that there are reports from Left to Die to Paradise for Pedophiles, Red Flag, and all of that was actually telling stories, live realities of people. They were not just reports that had articles, data, and statistics, right? And when I read the Paradise of Pedophile for the first time, I felt so emotional. I felt drawn to the story. So I really understood when he said that climate stories are really very, very inspiring and very handy for people to be triggered to take climate action. And that is why I ventured into climate storytelling in all forms of arts.
All right. I know that you grew up in the Niger Delta, so this is like a cause that is personal to you. Can you tell me how your background influenced the work that you do now? I mean, why is it so important to you that people listen to what you're doing or people take action from the stories that you tell?
Oh, yes. So I tell people that I'm a pastor's daughter that grew up in the Niger Delta. And as a pastor's daughter, you have to go from one missionary journey to the other. And I realized that the issues of the Niger Delta are interrelated. They are interconnected. So from one community to the other, where we served, there were gas flares, there were oil spills and all of that. So as a child, I didn't really understand what the issues were. In fact, gas flare to me then was like something very glamorous. But as I grew up, I realized that those were actually actually issues that are cutting short the life of people. My brother was diagnosed of asthma, and we had no asthma history in my family. And that was because we were living in a community where there was constant inhalation of gas flare. There was a constant gas flare lamp in that community, and my brother was fated with that reality. Of course, that is what actually inspired me to start telling climate stories, and so that people would be able to understand that these things really exist, because most people have not really accepted the reality of climate issues. And this is because they've been reading articles, they've been reading data, statistics, but when you tell stories, right, these stories help them to actually relate with the issue, because these are individuals talking. These are people that are living the realities talking. So that was my inspiration. I lived in a place where there was high sea level, you know. Sometimes the water moves into our trestle because we lived near the rivers. And most times when, as children, we were trying fishing, right? But when we go to the sea to actually the river to actually catch fish, we discover that there are oil slicks on the surface of the rivers. And for me, I grew up to understand that those were actually
realities, yes. So we could spend all day talking about the problems and the challenges that you spotlight and the stories that you tell, but really it's all about impact at the end of the day. Somebody might be out there thinking that, does this really matter? Does telling these stories make a difference? Can it actually make an impact? What would you say to someone like that?
Yes, of course. Stories tell a lot of difference. You know why? Because people do not like reading too much. They do not like taking a newspaper to hear about issues. They just want, if you notice, people are glued to their screen when it comes to home movies. So people like stories. If you go on TikTok, if you go on Instagram, you discover that people that tell stories have more followers, because people just want to sit down and hear stories. And this is because stories are very, very relatable. They trigger people to do a lot of things. My mother, when I was growing up, would watch Nollywood movies, and she's telling us, okay, this is the prayer point from this movie. So people actually are moved to action when you tell stories. And that is why I believe that climate stories actually push people to action. Personally, I started climate stories because of a story I heard. I was never privy to people living with disabilities and climate change. But when I saw a story, an animated story, I actually said, okay, this is a nice story. Of course, I was triggered to start telling my own story, just to make people aware of the issues.
All right, then that's where we'll leave it. Perfect, Johndick. But we definitely would bring you back to expand further on this conversation. Time would not allow us to do that right now. And, you know, you've heard all the details from Perfect Johndick this morning, and one thing that you have said that stood out for me is the fact that stories do matter, right? If you are thinking of what you can do to change the world, what you can do to make a difference in the society, one thing you can do is to tell stories. And that would be all for Climate Chat this morning. Thank you once again, Perfect Johndick. She is the communication and media lead at We the People campaign, and also a climate storyteller. And that's how much we can take on today's episode of Climate Chat. I'll be back next week with yet another exciting segment of Climate Chat on this show. In the meantime, I'll leave you with another performance from Perfect Johndick while we get ready for the entertainment segments.
Before the invention of these dwellers, we thrived as one with our surroundings. We were not naive, we were stewards of our domain. Our environment was green, free from toxicity. We were children of the mangroves, and the rivers whispered their secrets to us. Our forest was shelter for biodiversity, providing succulent meats and herbs. Our earth was fecund, yielding food that nourished our bodies and souls. And our rivers flowed as lifelines, serving as our laundry, bathroom and test tanks. Wait a minute, was it not us who sculpted our fishing boats with skilled hands? We were architects of our own abodes, extracted oil from palm fruit and transformed cassava into nourishing gari. We were midwives to birth, healers of ailments with natural herbs. To the rhythm of beating drums, we danced under the trees, savoring the taste of palm wine before red wine touched our lips. Our homes were not swallowed by floods, nor were our farmland. Constant spills are a menace, robbing us of the fatness of our crops. The fish have utterly disappeared and livelihoods have been taken away. We are migrating by force, losing our culture and heritage. There's no healthcare system to even cater to cancer. Adults suffocate. Children choke. My brother longs for air because his lungs has been hooked. Greed has poisoned us. Profit